Welcome back to the OCAD Youth Sports Report. My name is Avishai Sol, and this week is sort of the final week of our second season. It's been a great season. We've had some wonderful moments. Maybe I'll show a bit of a montage right now. Let's all talk about sports. Internal pain will give you nothing. Basically, I was a baby.
Rough in the Afghanistan, eh?
And I spilled hot gravy all over myself. I love Joe Schmo. Damn it. And then skated backwards a little bit. That's not really what you want. But yes, this is the final episode of Season 2. Sort of. What do I mean by sort of? Well, we'll have an episode on next week, but it'll be a little different. You won't see my beautiful face. It's a bit of a special episode. I think you're really going to like it. I won't say more. After that, we're going to take a little break before returning for the summer season. But for now, this is a brief goodbye. After, of course, we talk about the sports that we had this past week, in which there have been many great storylines. Let's get to it. Let's start off with some baseball news. The MLB season opened up this past week. Opening day saw the Cubs beat the Brewers, the Royals beat the Guardians, the Cardinals beat the Pirates, the Mets beat the Nationals, the Reds beat the Braves, the Astros beat the Angels, and the Diamondbacks beat the Padres. The Blue Jays play the Rangers in... I don't have a watch. Today. They play them today, but they're a high hopes for this Blue Jays team as they continue to acquire star after star after star. A huge storyline from this most recent stretch of sports has been the Masters, golf. Philosophers have wondered for years of what truly makes a person rich. And the answer is if you watch golf. But everybody should know that one man in particular in these Masters has seemingly risen from the grave, and that is Tiger Woods. The only golfing star every person on the planet knows. Tiger Woods, while by no means in the prime of his career, thought to have retired, has returned to the Masters and has been playing pretty well. Holding his own, not in the top of the top anymore, but still competing. If you look to the top, you'll see Im Sung-jae and Danny Willett in the lead currently. Moving on to some college basketball, we saw Kentucky beat North Carolina to win the men's NCAA tournament, great for them, and South Carolina beating Connecticut for the women's NCAA title. But I want to briefly talk about one of their bright stars. I know that they didn't win, but UConn is still one of the biggest name schools in women's college basketball. And particularly one player stands out among the rest. A point guard who has been lighting up women's college basketball and is projected to go #1 in her WNBA draft when she declares. Her name is Paige Beckers. And I want you to remember her name because not only is she sporting the kind of talent and ability that you would expect from a star athlete like that, but in the manner she does it too. We've seen a lot of bigs and forwards dominate in the women's game. Sue Bird comes to mind. Of course, we have had our star guards like Diana Taurasi, but even then, we haven't seen a guard with the flair quite like Paige Becker. She plays the game with a Steve Nash, Trae Young, Steph Curry-like energy and quick twitch athleticism that is going to be really fun for the sport in the years to follow. Who are now the 5th seed in the East after beating the Philadelphia 76ers, the Raptors. It looks like they're going to be playing the Sixers in the playoffs in a few weeks. Who would have thought that the Raptors at the beginning of the season would come so far as to reach not just the play-in, not just the playoffs, but the 5th seed in said playoffs. It's just been clicking. It's just been clicking great. And if you're a Raptors fan thinking, oh, the Sixers, they got Embiid, they got Harden, sure, we might have beat them last night in a regular season. In the playoffs, what are we going to do? We beat them last night without Fred VanVleet and without OG Anunoby. So the Raptors depleted beat the Sixers, albeit they didn't have Matisse Thybulle, but they had Embiid, they had Harden, they had Maxey, they had Harris, they had their guys, and we beat them to the punch. So am I picking the Raptors to win the series? No. But am I betting against them? I wouldn't count him out. Moving on to some soccer, we're going to have some MVP debates for the Champions League because Karim Benzema is now ahead of Kylian Mbappe for the MVP. Remember that, because they've both been having incredible seasons, and Mbappe is probably the best player in the world, but Karim is killing it right now. Moving us over to the NHL, where we have a Matthew Shesterkin race for the MVP. Of course, the Leafs blew a 5-1 lead to the Panthers the other day, which made me just want to take out my innards and put them on the table, but it's whatever. And then we have a Jokic, Giannis, Embiid race for MVP. So we have all these MVPs going at once. We're starting to see this more and more with the MVP race becoming so close between multiple players. And it doesn't matter the sport, whether it's Champions League, whether it's the NHL, whether it's the NBA, NFL, because of the incredible talent that exists now in athletics, regardless of the sport. We have more star players than ever, which means more MVP contenders than ever, which makes these races even closer. Take the NBA, for example. Jokic, Giannis, and Embiid, each super duper stars in their own regard, each play the game in a completely different way, and each within a hair's breadth of each other within the MVP voting. We have Jokic over here putting up the incredible numbers for a team that's not quite winning so much. We have Embiid over here doing similar stuff, but on a team that has higher aspirations for this year's playoff race. And then Giannis down the middle, who could be the best player in the world, who could be the front runner for Finals MVP and the championship, but has a little bit of voter fatigue, so he's been getting that. So what is an MVP? It demands so much of our attention because debating these top tier athletes, regardless of the sport, is part of what's so fun about fandom. It's not just watching the games, it's talking about the games and talking about their star players involved. And MVP is the highest honor we can give an individual in a team sport. So when discussing the MVP race, it's only natural to have those feelings and those opinions and those sports philosophies stirred up and regurgitated at your friends and your enemies and your poisonous reptiles. Let's break it down. It says most valuable player. That's the words. MVP, most valuable player. But value to what? Value to your individual team? The Denver Nuggets without Nikola Jokic would be a bottom team in the league. That's just a fact. Jokic does so much for that team. The Bucks would be a solid team without Giannis, and the Sixers would be a solid team without Embiid. Not as good as they are, obviously, but they wouldn't reach the depths without their MVPs compared to the Nuggets. So is valuable the most valuable to your team? By that case, Jokic wins. Or is valuable the most valuable to the league? In which case, you could argue Steph Curry wins or LeBron James wins. They're the ones who sell the most jerseys. They're the ones who have the highest count in terms of fan following and fame. So is it most valuable to the league? And valuable in terms of player, valuable in terms of money, or value, what are we measuring here? Then it takes a turn when you get into the narratives, right? The argument against Giannis Antetokounmpo, who most agree is probably the best player in the world right now. There are arguments for other players, but he's coming off a championship and back-to-back MVPs, Defensive Player of the Years. He's really, the arguments against him are getting shallower and shallower. But there have been plenty of times where the best player in the league didn't win the MVP. Before Giannis, before this most recent stretch, when LeBron was at the peak of his powers, for nearly a decade, he was the best player in the league, and yet he doesn't have 10 MVPs. Same thing with Jordan. Same thing with Kobe or Duncan or Shaq. Just because you're the best player in the world doesn't mean you win the MVP. Nobody was arguing in 2017 when Russell Westbrook won his MVP that he was better than LeBron or Durant, but he won the MVP. So what are we measuring here? That narrative, which defies logic and defies opinion, that narrative says, oh, this guy, not just because he was so good this season, but also because he really deserves this MVP. Or the opposite, this guy, he's been really good this season, but we voted for him last year. He won the MVP last year. Let's give it to somebody new. That narrative has an incredible power on deciding what the MVP is. Not just about how good you've been, or how much your team has won, or how much you're liked, or how famous you are, how important you are to your team or your league. It's about the narrative too, which unfortunately defies logic. Narrative is not a thing you can control really as a player so much. Unfortunately, my cop-out answer for what is an MVP is it's a combination of everything. But when picking an MVP, you gotta do just that. Think about everything. You can't just cut out one thing or another. When deciding on an MVP, it's not just about the individual stats or performances. By that metric, Jokic wins. He's had the best statistical season. But that's not all that it's about. Is he a threat to win the championship? Bucks are. Sixers are, although a little less so with the Sixers. My point is, when picking your MVP, whether it's in the NBA with Jokic, Giannis, or Embiid, the NHL with Matthews and Shesterkin, or the Champions League with Mbappe and Benzema. You got to take everything into account. Which takes us to our final segment of the week, this week's Athlete of the Week. This week's Athlete of the Week is my friend Jake. Jake may look like the 8th dwarf, but in reality, he is a powerful basketball player. You see his hair flowing in the wind in that picture? It's majestic to watch. Jakey, my good friend, you are this week's Athlete of the Week, not just for your skills on the field, on the court, but also because you refuse to commit to an apartment with me next year, and I want to call you out, you bastard. This has been the OCAD Sports Report, Season 2. I will see you all for Season 3 in a few weeks. It has been an absolute pleasure. Until next time.